Sarah Bennett stood at the imposing iron gates of al-Rashid Manor, her heart pounding with anticipation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the meticulously maintained gardens, making the mansion appear even more intimidating than it already was. As a newly hired private nurse, she couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment would be different from any other in her career. The position had come with strict instructions and an impressive salary, but something in Sarah's gut told her there was more to this job than met the eye. As she made her way up the winding driveway, her shoes crunching against the gravel, she noticed the windows of the massive estate seemed to watch her every move, like silent sentinels guarding ancient secrets. Mrs. Victoria al-Rashid, the lady of the house, greeted her with perfectly manicured nails and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Miss Bennett, welcome to our home. I trust you understand the delicate nature of your position here." Her voice carried the polish of expensive finishing schools and years of social conditioning. "Yes, Mrs. al-Rashid. I've reviewed Mr. al-Rashid's case thoroughly," Sarah replied, maintaining her professional composure despite the chill that ran down her spine at Victoria's calculating gaze. "Kareem was once the most influential businessman in the Arabian horse racing circuit," Victoria said, leading Sarah through marble-floored corridors adorned with priceless artwork. "The accident changed everything. Now, he requires constant care. Though I must say, I don't share your profession's optimism about his condition." Sarah noticed how Victoria spoke about her husband in the past tense, as if he were already gone. They reached a wing of the house that felt different from the rest, quieter, more clinical. The door to Kareem's room opened to reveal a state-of-the-art medical setup that seemed at odds with the mansion's old-world luxury. And there he was. Kareem al-Rashid lay still in his bed, his once commanding presence reduced to silent stillness. But something caught Sarah's attention immediately. A subtle movement of his eyes as they entered the room, a barely perceptible change in his breathing pattern. "The previous nurses simply maintained his basic needs," Victoria explained, checking her reflection in a nearby window. "I don't expect miracles, Miss Bennett. Just keep him comfortable and maintain your professional distance. The staff will show you to your quarters." As Victoria's footsteps faded down the hallway, Sarah approached her patient. Despite his unresponsive state, she could sense something in his presence, a consciousness, a spark that others had missed or chosen to ignore. She leaned closer, studying his face. "Mr. al-Rashid," she spoke softly, "I'm Sarah Bennett, your new nurse. I want you to know that I'm here to help you, and I believe there's more to your story than what I've been told." For a fraction of a second, his eyes seemed to focus on her face, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. In that brief moment, she saw something that would change everything: recognition, awareness, and perhaps even hope. As she began her evening routine, familiarizing herself with the equipment and reading through his charts, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she had stepped into something far more complex than a simple nursing assignment. The mansion's oppressive silence was broken only by the gentle hum of medical equipment and the distant sound of Victoria's heels clicking against marble floors as she orchestrated her social life in other parts of the house. Looking out the window at the estate's vast grounds, Sarah noticed an old stable in the distance, its doors locked and windows dusty with neglect. A gentle breeze carried the sound of nickering horses from somewhere beyond the property's boundaries, and she saw her patient's fingers twitch ever so slightly at the familiar sound. Sarah pulled out her notebook and began to write, documenting every minute response, every subtle reaction. She had learned early in her career that the smallest details often held the biggest secrets. As night fell over al-Rashid Manor, she made a silent promise to herself and her patient. She would uncover the truth buried beneath the mansion's polished facade, no matter the cost. What she didn't know then was that her promise would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about healing, power, and the ultimate price of truth. As she settled into her new role, the shadows of al-Rashid Manor seemed to whisper secrets that had long been kept silent, waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Dawn broke over al-Rashid Manor, casting long shadows through the ornate windows of Kareem's room. Sarah had spent her first week establishing a routine, but more importantly, She had begun to notice patterns that others had overlooked. Every morning, as the first rays of sunlight touched the ancient tapestries adorning the walls, Kareem's breathing would change ever so slightly, as if his body remembered a time when he would rise early to tend to his beloved horses. The household staff, initially distant and formal, had begun to warm to Sarah's presence. Maria, the elderly housekeeper, who had served the al-Rashid family for over 2 decades, was the first to break the wall of silence that seemed to permeate the mansion. "Miss Bennet," Maria whispered one morning as she brought fresh linens, "I've never seen anyone pay such close attention to Mr. Kareem's responses before. The other nurses, they treated him like furniture, just like the missus does now." Sarah carefully adjusted Kareem's pillows, speaking to him as she always did, describing the weather and the activities planned for the day. "The garden looks beautiful this morning, Mr. al-Rashid. The roses are in full bloom, and I can hear the birds singing in your orange trees." Maria paused in her work, watching as Kareem's eyes followed Sarah's movements. "You know, before the accident, he would spend hours in those gardens, especially near the old fountain. He had such plans for this place." Victoria's sharp voice cut through the air like a knife, making both women jump. "Maria, I believe the West Wing requires your attention." The housekeeper hurried away, leaving Sarah alone with Victoria and Kareem. "Miss Bennet, while I appreciate your courage enthusiasm, I must remind you that we are paying you to provide medical care, not to chat with the help or indulge in pointless conversations with someone who cannot respond." Victoria's perfectly arranged features betrayed a hint of annoyance. Sarah stood her ground, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Mrs. al-Rashid, current research shows that regular verbal interaction can significantly benefit patients in Mr. al-Rashid's condition. I'm following established therapeutic protocols." Victoria's perfectly plucked eyebrows arched slightly. "Research? I suppose next you'll tell me that playing music or bringing in therapy animals would help as well." Her tone dripped with sarcasm. "Actually, yes," Sarah replied calmly, noting how Kareem's heart rate monitor showed a slight increase during their exchange. "Both have shown remarkable results in similar cases." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Just keep him comfortable and quiet. I'm hosting a charity luncheon this afternoon and I don't need any disruptions." She turned on her heel and left, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Once alone with Kareem, Sarah noticed his heart rate remained elevated. "Don't worry, Mr. al-Rashid," she said softly. "I'm not going anywhere." She could have sworn she saw his finger twitch in response. Later that day, as Victoria's social event filled the mansion with the murmur of wealthy voices and tinkling crystal, Sarah took advantage of the distraction to explore the medical records stored in Kareem's room. Something had been nagging at her about his treatment history. As she carefully reviewed the documents, a pattern began to emerge. The initial emergency response reports described Kareem as responsive and aware immediately after the accident. It wasn't until several days later, after being transferred to a private facility at Victoria's insistence, that his condition deteriorated dramatically. Sarah's concentration was broken by the sound of classical music drifting up from the garden party below. Through the window, she could see Victoria holding court among her guests, laughing and gesturing with practiced grace. But it was the conversation she overheard between 2 staff members in the hallway that truly caught her attention. "The missus has already started renovating the stable block," one whispered. "Says she's turning it into a spa retreat once everything's settled." "But those horses were Mr. Kareem's life," the other replied. "He spent years building that breeding program." Sarah turned back to her patient, noting how his breathing had become more rapid. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Mr. al-Rashid, I want you to know that I understand now. There's more going on here than a simple accident and recovery, isn't there?" The subtle flutter of his eyelids was all the confirmation she needed. Sarah knew she would have to tread carefully, but she was now certain of 2 things. Kareem al-Rashid was far more aware than anyone believed, and someone had gone to great lengths to ensure he remained silent. Sarah's discovery about Kareem's medical records kept her awake long into the night. As she sat in her modest quarters, reviewing her notes by lamplight, a soft knock at her door startled her. It was Maria, clutching what appeared to be an old leather-bound album. "Miss Bennet," the housekeeper whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway, "there's something you need to see." She placed the album on Sarah's desk with trembling hands. "These are from before everything changed." The photographs told a story that made Sarah's heart ache. Page after page showed Kareem al-Rashid as he once was, tall, dignified, and full of life. In many images, he stood proudly among magnificent Arabian horses, his face beaming with joy. There were photos of him at international competitions, accepting awards and working with local children's charities. "He wasn't just wealthy, Miss Bennet," Maria explained, her voice thick with emotion. "He was beloved. The breeding program he built helped preserve pure Arabian bloodlines, and he used the profits to fund educational programs for underprivileged youth." One particular photo caught Sarah's attention. Kareem stood next to a stunning Russian blue cat, its silver blue coat gleaming in the sunlight. "That's Sultan," Maria said, "Mr. Kareem's special companion. The cat disappeared right after Victoria took control of the household." The next morning, Sarah approached her patient with renewed purpose. "Good morning, Mr. al-Rashid," she said, opening the curtains to let in the morning light. "I learned more about your work with Arabian horses last night. Would you like me to tell you about what's happening in the racing world now?" The subtle movement of his finger against the sheets was becoming a familiar sign of response. Sarah had begun documenting these movements meticulously, building a pattern of evidence that consciousness remained behind his outwardly unresponsive state. As she went about her morning routine, Sarah shared news about recent horse shows and breeding developments. She noticed his heart rate would increase slightly whenever she mentioned specific horses' names she had learned from the photo album. Victoria swept into the room later that morning, dressed impeccably for what appeared to be another social engagement. "Miss Bennet, I've been reviewing your requisition orders. These additional therapeutic supplies seem excessive. For their standard equipment for cognitive stimulation therapy," Sarah explained, standing her ground. "The results so far have been promising." Victoria's perfectly painted lips curved into a cold smile. "Results? I don't see any results, only a waste of resources on futile exercises. Perhaps we need to reevaluate your position here." Before Sarah could respond, a crash echoed from the hallway. One of the maids had dropped a tea tray, sending china shattering across the marble floor. As Victoria rushed out to address the commotion, Sarah noticed something remarkable. Kareem's hand had moved, ever so slightly, toward the call button by his bed. That afternoon, Sarah made her way to the abandoned stable block, searching for any clues that might help her understand more about her patient's past. The place still held echoes of its former glory: empty stalls with brass nameplates, premium leather tack gathering dust, and faded ribbons telling stories of victories long past. In what appeared to be the former office, Sarah discovered a hidden drawer in the old desk. Inside lay a series of documents: breeding records, competition registrations, and most intriguingly, a sealed envelope addressed to Kareem's lawyer. The date on the envelope was just days before his accident. As she carefully examined the space, Sarah heard footsteps approaching. Quickly replacing everything exactly as she had found it, she slipped out through a side door just as Victoria's voice carried across the yard, discussing renovation plans with a contractor. That evening, as Sarah sat with Kareem during his physical therapy session, she made a decision. "Mr. al-Rashid," she said softly, ensuring they were alone, "I believe I understand now why maintaining this silence serves certain people's interests. But I want you to know that I'm going to find a way to help you break free from it." The machines monitoring his vital signs showed a distinct spike in response to her words. Sarah leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have an idea, but I'll need you to trust me. Tomorrow I'm going to try something different, something that might help prove to everyone that you're still here, still fighting." As if in answer, a single tear rolled down Kareem's cheek, the first dramatic show of emotion she had witnessed since arriving at al-Rashid Manor. Sarah carefully wiped it away, her own eyes glistening with determination. She knew that whatever happened next would either change everything or cost her everything, but she had come too far to turn back now. Sarah's plan began to take shape early the next morning. Using her day off, she visited a local pet shelter, her heart set on finding exactly what she needed. After several hours of searching, she found her, a Russian blue kitten, with eyes that seemed to hold the same gentle wisdom she had seen in the photograph of Sultan. The shelter worker smiled as she filled out the adoption papers. "These cats are known for their loyalty and intuition," she explained. "They can form incredibly deep bonds with their humans, especially those in need of emotional support." Sneaking the kitten into al-Rashid Manor proved easier than expected. The household staff, who had grown to trust Sarah's judgment, turned a blind eye to her larger-than-usual shoulder bag. Maria even helped her settle the tiny creature in her quarters, providing an extra bowl and some leftover fish from the kitchen. "Miss Bennet," Maria whispered, watching the kitten explore its new surroundings, "you remind me of Mr. Kareem. He too knew that sometimes we must break small rules to do what's right." That evening, after Victoria had departed for another social engagement, Sarah carefully carried the kitten to Kareem's room. The moment she placed the small creature on his bed, something extraordinary happened. The kitten, as if guided by some invisible force, walked directly to Kareem's hand and curled up against it. "Mr. al-Rashid," Sarah said softly, "I'd like you to meet someone. I know she's not Sultan, but I thought perhaps she could help bring back some of those memories." The monitors began showing subtle changes in Kareem's vital signs. His breathing deepened and his heart rate increased slightly. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They followed the kitten's every movement with an intensity Sarah had never seen before. As days passed, Sarah established a routine. The kitten, whom she named Luna, would visit Kareem during the quiet evening hours. She noticed that his responses during their regular therapy sessions began to improve, especially after these visits. His finger movements became more deliberate and his eyes more focused. However, their secret couldn't remain hidden forever. One evening, as Sarah was conducting their usual therapy session with Luna purring contentedly on Kareem's chest, Victoria returned unexpectedly from her social engagement. The sound of her heels clicking down the hallway sent Sarah into a panic, but there wasn't enough time to hide Luna. Victoria's face transformed from shock to fury when she entered the room. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to make Luna bristle. "How dare you bring that creature into my house near my husband?" Sarah stood her ground, gesturing to the monitors. "Mrs. al-Rashid, please look at these readings. Since Luna's visits began, your husband's vital signs have shown remarkable improvement. His neural responses are stronger and—" "Get that animal out of here immediately," Victoria interrupted, her perfectly manicured hands shaking with rage. "And Miss Bennet, consider this your final warning. One more breach of protocol and you'll be looking for new employment." But as Victoria moved to shoo Luna away, something unprecedented happened. Kareem's hand moved. Not just a twitch, but a deliberate motion, reaching toward the kitten, as if to protect her. The movement was slight but unmistakable. Victoria froze, her face draining of color. For a moment the room was silent, except for Luna's soft purring and the steady beep of the monitors. Then, collecting herself, Victoria straightened her designer jacket. "Remove the cat, Miss Bennet. We'll discuss this incident tomorrow." After Victoria left, Sarah remained with Kareem, her heart racing with both fear and excitement. The hand movement had been the strongest response yet, and Victoria had witnessed it. "Mr. al-Rashid," she whispered, "we're making progress. Don't give up now." That night, as Sarah lay in her bed with Luna curled up beside her, she began formulating her next move. The incident with Victoria had shown her two critical things. First, that Kareem was indeed capable of voluntary movement when sufficiently motivated, and second, that Victoria's reaction to any sign of improvement was one of alarm rather than joy. Sarah pulled out her notebook, reviewing her observations from the past weeks. Patterns were emerging, patterns that suggested the truth behind Kareem's condition might be even more complex than she had initially suspected. As she wrote, a plan began to form in her mind, one that would require perfect timing and, quite possibly, risk everything she had worked for. The morning after Victoria's discovery of Luna brought a tense atmosphere to al-Rashid Manor. Sarah arrived at work to find security cameras being installed in Kareem's room and the adjacent corridors. A new member of the household staff, introduced as security personnel, watched her every move with hawkish intensity. Victoria's attempt to assert control, however, had an unexpected effect on the other staff members. During her morning rounds, Sarah found a small note slipped under her door from Maria. "Meet me in the old greenhouse during your lunch break. Important." The greenhouse, a forgotten Victorian structure at the far end of the garden, had long since fallen into disuse. When Sarah arrived, she found not only Maria but also Thomas, the elderly groundskeeper, and Elena, the cook. Their faces were etched with concern and determination. "Miss Bennett," Thomas began, his weathered hands nervously adjusting his cap. "We've served this family for years. What happened to Mr. Kareem? It never sat right with any of us. The way things changed after his accident, how quickly the missus took control." Elena stepped forward, her usually cheerful face serious. "We saw the improvements you've made with Mr. Kareem. The way he responds to you, to that little cat. It's like watching him wake up from a long sleep." "But Mrs. al-Rashid," Maria added, lowering her voice, "she's been making phone calls. We've overheard her speaking with the hospital board, trying to have you transferred. She's claiming you're causing disruptions to his care routine." Sarah felt her heart race but kept her composure. "Have any of you noticed anything unusual about Mr. al-Rashid's condition in the past, particularly in the early days after his accident?" The three staff members exchanged meaningful looks. Thomas cleared his throat. "The day of the accident, I was there. He was conscious, talking even. It wasn't until after they moved him to that private facility that he became like this. And the medical team that treated him initially," Eleanor added, "they were all replaced within a week. The missus said it was to provide better care, but..." Sarah's mind raced with the implications. "I need your help," she said finally. "I have a plan, but it's risky. If I'm right about Mr. al-Rashid's condition, we might be able to help him reclaim his voice and his life. But I'll need all of you to be my eyes and ears." The staff members nodded in unanimous agreement. They spent the next hour crafting a careful strategy, each person taking on a specific role. Thomas would monitor Victoria's comings and goings. Eleanor would ensure Sarah had access to the kitchen for preparing special therapeutic meals, and Maria would help coordinate their communications while maintaining an appearance of normalcy. That afternoon, Sarah returned to Kareem's room with renewed purpose. Despite the watching eyes of the security camera, she maintained her professional routine while finding subtle ways to communicate with her patient. She developed a system of eye blinks, one for yes, two for no, that would go unnoticed by casual observers. "Mr. al-Rashid," she said clearly, knowing the cameras were recording, "we're going to try some new therapeutic exercises today." What she was really saying, through carefully choreographed movements and meaningful glances, was something entirely different. As she worked, Sarah noticed Kareem's responses becoming more definitive. When she mentioned Luna, safely hidden in her quarters, his vital signs showed clear recognition. The security guard focused more on his phone than the subtle interactions between nurse and patient, missed the significant looks and small hand movements that passed between them. Later that evening, as Sarah reviewed Kareem's medical charts, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The signatures on his transfer papers to the private facility, they didn't match his other legal documents she had seen in the stable office. The difference was subtle, but as someone who had been documenting his hand movements, she recognized that the strokes were wrong. Victoria appeared in the doorway, her silk evening dress rustling softly. "Miss Bennett, I've been thinking about our little discussion yesterday. Perhaps we should review your position here. Join me in my study after your shift ends." As Victoria sashayed away, Sarah felt a gentle pressure on her hand. Kareem had managed to move his fingers enough to touch her. The message was clear: be careful. Sarah squeezed his hand back, a silent promise passing between them. Whatever Victoria had planned for their meeting, Sarah was now more certain than ever that she was on the right track. With the support of the staff and Kareem's increasingly responsive state, Sarah knew she had to move forward with her plan quickly. The next 24 hours would be crucial. As she prepared for her meeting with Victoria, she sent a quick text to Maria. Operation Aurora begins at dawn. The pieces were in place. Now they just had to hope their timing would be perfect. Victoria's study was a testament to calculated luxury. Persian rugs cushioned Sarah's steps as she entered, and the walls were lined with expensive art pieces that seemed chosen more for their price tags than aesthetic value. Victoria sat behind a massive mahogany desk, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. "Please sit down." Victoria gestured to a chair, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes cold as winter. "I've been reviewing your employment file, Miss Bennett. Your dedication to my husband's care is admirable, perhaps too admirable." Sarah maintained her composure, though her heart thundered in her chest. "Mrs. al-Rashid, my only concern is your husband's well-being and recovery." "Recovery?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and brittle. "My dear, you're operating under some rather dangerous misconceptions. Kareem's condition is permanent. All these little experiments of yours, the cat, the constant stimulation, the therapeutic exercises, they're giving the staff false hope. More importantly, they're disrupting the peaceful routine we've established here." "With all due respect," Sarah replied carefully, "I've documented significant improvements in Mr. al-Rashid's responses. His vital signs, his muscle reactions, his eye movements, they all indicate conscious awareness and increasing control." Victoria's perfectly manicured nails drummed once on the desk. "You know, the previous nurses understood their role better. They didn't ask questions about the accident. They didn't go digging through old medical records or spreading ridiculous theories among the staff." The threat in Victoria's voice was unmistakable, but Sarah pressed on. "I found some interesting discrepancies in those records, Mrs. al-Rashid. The initial emergency response reports show your husband was conscious and responsive after the accident. It wasn't until he was transferred to that private facility that his condition deteriorated. You're overstepping, Miss Bennett." Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I've already contacted the hospital board about your unconventional methods. They agree that perhaps it's time for a change in Kareem's care team. Before you make that call," Sarah said, reaching into her pocket, "you might want to see this." She placed a folded document on the desk, a copy of the transfer papers, with the questionable signatures she had discovered. Victoria's face remained impassive, but Sarah noticed a slight tremor in her hand as she picked up the paper. "Where did you get this?" "The same place I found evidence of Mr. al-Rashid's true condition immediately after the accident. The same place I discovered the changes made to his treatment protocol, changes that conveniently led to his current state." The grandfather clock in the corner ticked heavily as the two women stared at each other. Finally, Victoria's perfect facade cracked slightly. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Miss Bennett. Kareem's fortune, his influence. Do you think I'll let some nurse with a hero complex threaten everything I've built?" "Actually," Sarah stood, her voice steady, "I don't think you have a choice anymore. While we've been having this lovely chat, things have been happening that you might find interesting." Right on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "It's done, they're here." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "What have you done?" "I simply arranged for some people to receive copies of certain documents, medical records, transfer papers, bank statements, nothing that isn't already part of the official record. Of course, when viewed together, they tell quite a story." The sound of cars pulling up the Manor's driveway filtered through the study's windows. Victoria rose from her chair, mask of control finally slipping. "You're making a terrible mistake." "No, Mrs. al-Rashid," Sarah replied calmly. "The mistake was underestimating how many people truly care about your husband's well-being. The staff who've watched him all these years, the medical professionals who treated him initially, even the horses he loved, they've all been waiting for someone to finally see the truth." As voices began to echo from the Manor's entrance hall, Sarah turned to leave the study. "Oh, and one more thing," she paused at the door. "Mr. al-Rashid wanted me to tell you something. He remembers everything about the day of the accident. Everything." The color drained from Victoria's face as the implications of Sarah's words sank in. Outside the study, The mansion was coming alive with activity, footsteps and voices growing louder. Sarah's heart raced with anticipation. The next few moments would determine whether her carefully orchestrated plan would succeed or if she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. But one look at Victoria's crumbling composure told her she had struck right at the heart of the truth. The Manor's grand entrance hall had become a hub of activity. Dr. Marcus Chen, the neurologist who had initially treated Kareem after his accident, stood with a team of medical specialists. Beside them, Mr. Patterson, Kareem's longtime lawyer, clutched a briefcase filled with the documents Sarah had carefully compiled over the past weeks. Sarah rushed to Kareem's room, her heart pounding with equal parts excitement and anxiety. She found Maria already there, helping him prepare for what was to come. The elderly housekeeper had tears in her eyes as she adjusted his pillows with trembling hands. "Miss Bennett," Maria whispered, "Thomas says Mrs. al-Rashid is trying to leave through the back entrance." "Don't worry," Sarah replied, checking Kareem's vital signs. "Security is already in place. Mr. Patterson made sure of that." Dr. Chen entered the room, his familiar face showing a mix of concern and determination. "Sarah, I can't believe I didn't see it before. The treatment protocols that were implemented after his transfer, they were designed to suppress his consciousness, not enhance it." "The real question," Mr. Patterson interjected, joining them with his briefcase open, "is why someone would want to keep a man of Kareem's influence in such a state. The answer, I believe, lies in these documents." Sarah moved to Kareem's side, speaking softly near his ear. "Mr. al-Rashid, Dr. Chen is here, the doctor who first treated you after the accident. He's going to help us prove what really happened." Kareem's eyes focused intently on Dr. Chen, and his heart rate monitor showed an increase in activity. The neurologist approached, beginning a thorough examination. "The response patterns you've documented, Sarah, they're consistent with a patient emerging from medically induced suppression, not someone in a permanent vegetative state." As Dr. Chen worked, Victoria burst into the room, flanked by two men in expensive suits, her lawyers. "This is a private residence," she announced, her voice sharp with authority. "You're all trespassing." "Actually," Mr. Patterson replied calmly, holding up a document, "as Mr. al-Rashid's legal representative, I have every right to be here, and these medical professionals are here at my request to evaluate my client's condition." "Your client?" Victoria's laugh was brittle. "I have power of attorney. I make all medical decisions for my husband." "That's where you're wrong," Sarah stepped forward, nodding to Mr. Patterson. "Show her." The lawyer produced another document, the envelope Sarah had found in the stable office. "This is a power of attorney document signed by Mr. al-Rashid 3 days before his accident. It grants joint medical authority to his lawyer and his head of security, not to his wife. Apparently, he had concerns about potential conflicts of interest." Victoria's composure cracked further. "That document is irrelevant. My husband's condition renders him incapable of making decisions." "Does it?" Dr. Chen asked, reviewing the monitors, "because these readings suggest otherwise." "Mr. al-Rashid, can you hear me? If you understand, blink once." The room fell silent as everyone watched Kareem. Slowly, deliberately, he blinked once. Victoria's face drained of color. "Now," Dr. Chen continued, "I'm going to ask you some questions about the accident. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no. Were you conscious immediately afterward?" 1 blink. "Did you understand everything that was happening around you during your treatment?" 1 blink. "Were you aware when your treatment protocol was changed?" 1 blink. Sarah moved closer to Kareem, taking his hand. She could feel a slight pressure as he tried to squeeze her fingers. "Mr. al-Rashid," she said softly, "we have one more surprise for you." On cue, Thomas appeared in the doorway, leading someone Sarah had tracked down through her investigation. Dr. Amira Hassan, a specialist in neurological rehabilitation who had been suddenly dismissed from Kareem's case in the days following his transfer. "The treatment plan I originally proposed," Dr. Hassan explained, approaching the bed, "would have supported Mr. al-Rashid's recovery. Instead, it was replaced with a protocol that effectively trapped him in his own body." Victoria's lawyers exchanged worried glances as Mr. Patterson continued producing document after document. Bank transfers, amended medical directives, altered treatment records. The evidence painted a clear picture of systematic manipulation. Suddenly, Kareem's monitors began showing increased activity. His fingers twitched more forcefully in Sarah's hand, and his eyes fixed on Victoria with an intensity that made her step back. Then, to everyone's amazement, he began to move his lips, struggling to form words. Dr. Chen rushed forward with his instruments, and Dr. Hassan quickly joined him. "He's trying to speak," the specialist announced. "The medication's suppressing. His responses must be wearing off." Sarah leaned closer, her heart racing as she watched Kareem fight against years of enforced silence. The room held its breath as his first words in years began to take shape, words that would change everything at al-Rashid Manor forever. The tension in the room was palpable as Kareem struggled to form his first words. Dr. Hassan quickly adjusted his bed to a more upright position while Dr. Chen monitored his vital signs. Sarah remained by his side, her hand still firmly clasped in his increasingly strong grip. "Take your time, Mr. al-Rashid," Dr. Hassan encouraged softly. "Don't force it. Let the words come naturally." Victoria stood frozen near the doorway, her usually perfect posture now rigid with tension. Her lawyers whispered urgently in her ear, but she seemed beyond hearing them. Finally, Kareem's voice emerged, raspy from years of disuse, but clear enough to be understood by everyone in the room. "Sarah, thank you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she squeezed his hand gently. "You're welcome, Mr. al-Rashid." But Kareem wasn't finished. With visible effort, he turned his head slightly toward Victoria. "I remember everything." His words came slowly, each one a triumph over the silence that had imprisoned him. "The argument, that day, you threatened to expose—" "Mr. al-Rashid," Victoria interrupted, suddenly finding her voice. "You're confused." "The accident? No!" The force of Kareem's response surprised everyone. "No more lies." His breathing was labored, but his determination was evident. "Sarah, the envelope. In my office." Mr. Patterson stepped forward, already removing the document in question. "I have it right here, Kareem. The one you signed just before the accident?" Kareem blinked once, emphatically. Dr. Hassan quickly intervened with a sip of water, helping him gather strength to continue. The room waited in tense silence as he collected his thoughts. "I knew," he continued, each word stronger than the last, "Victoria was embezzling from the foundation, children's programs, horse therapy. She was taking everything." The revelation sent a shockwave through the room. Victoria's lawyers exchanged alarmed glances, while Mr. Patterson began furiously taking notes. "When I confronted her," Kareem's voice grew steadier as he spoke, as if each word broke more of the chains that had bound him. "She threatened to destroy everything I built that day in the car." Sarah's medical training kicked in as she noticed his vital signs elevating. "Mr. al-Rashid, please don't overtax yourself. We can continue this later." But Kareem was determined to finish. "No, I must tell, and she had the brakes on tampered with, but I survived. So she found another way, son, to silence me." Victoria suddenly bolted for the door, but Thomas and 2 security officers blocked her path. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled completely as she spun around, her voice rising to a shriek. "You have no proof. None of you can prove anything." "Actually," Mr. Patterson interjected calmly, "we have quite a lot of proof. Bank records, tampered medical documents, and most importantly, witness testimonies from the staff at the private facility where Mr. al-Rashid's treatment was deliberately altered." Luna, who had somehow slipped into the room during the commotion, jumped gracefully onto Kareem's bed and curled up beside him. A small smile touched his lips as he reached out to stroke her fur, the movement small but deliberate. "My horses," he said softly, looking at Sarah. "The breeding program is safe," Sarah assured him quickly. "I contacted your old stable manager, Mr. Rodriguez. He's been maintaining a small operation with some of your best bloodlines, waiting for the day you might return." The news seemed to energize Kareem further. His voice grew stronger as he addressed the room. "I want to make a statement, officially." He looked at Mr. Patterson. "While I most still can." Dr. Hassan stepped forward. "Perhaps we should let Mr. al-Rashid rest for a moment. This is a lot of exertion after such a long period of suppression." "But..." Kareem's eyes were clear and determined. "No, Victoria wanted me silent and for too long. Now I will speak." As he began his official statement, Sarah watched the man she had come to know through subtle signs and minimal responses transform into something more, a phoenix rising from the ashes of enforced silence. Each word he spoke seemed to bring more strength to his voice, more purpose to his movements. Victoria, now seated and flanked by security, had dissolved into a pale, trembling shadow of her former imperious self. Her expensive designer outfit seemed to hang on her frame like a costume that no longer fit, her carefully applied makeup failing to hide the fear in her eyes. In the days following Kareem's revelations, al-Rashid Manor underwent a dramatic transformation. The oppressive atmosphere that had haunted its halls for years began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and renewal. Victoria had been escorted from the premises, her access to the estate's resources immediately suspended pending full investigation. Dr. Hassan had taken charge of Kareem's medical care, working closely with Sarah to implement a comprehensive rehabilitation program. The doctor's eyes sparkled with professional excitement as she reviewed his progress. "It's remarkable," she told Sarah one morning while updating his charts. "Once we eliminated the suppressive medications, his neural responses began improving exponentially." Kareem's determination proved to be his greatest asset. Despite years of muscular atrophy, he approached each therapy session with unwavering focus. Sarah watched in admiration as he worked through the exercises, his face set in concentration as he relearned movements that had once been automatic. "Tell me again," he asked Sarah during one of their breaks, his speech becoming clearer with each passing day, "about how you knew. How did you see what others missed?" Sarah sat beside his bed, Luna purring contentedly in her lap. "It was the little things at first, the way your eyes followed movement, how your breathing changed when certain topics were mentioned. But mostly, it was because I talked to you like a person, not a patient. I watched, I listened, and I believed in what I saw." Kareem's hand, steadier now, reached out to scratch Luna behind the ears. "You brought life back into these walls, not just for me, but for everyone here." He glanced around the room, which had been transformed from a sterile medical space into something more welcoming. The windows were now always open, letting in fresh air and the distant sounds of life from the gardens. Mr. Rodriguez, Kareem's former stable manager, had become a frequent visitor. He would sit for hours with Kareem, updating him on the breeding program he had maintained in secret. "Your finest stallion, Malik," he reported proudly. "His bloodline has produced some of the most promising Arabian foals I've seen in years." The news brought a light to Kareem's eyes that grew stronger each day. During one particularly good therapy session, he made an announcement that energized the entire household. "I want to see them," he declared. "The horses. It's time." Dr. Hassan and Sarah exchanged glances, quickly evaluating the medical implications. "We'll need to take precautions," Dr. Hassan said thoughtfully, "but I believe we can arrange it. The sensory stimulation could be highly beneficial to your recovery." The preparation for Kareem's first trip to the stables became a house-wide project. Thomas spent days ensuring the paths were smooth and accessible. Maria organized a small celebration to mark the occasion. Even Luna seemed to sense the importance of the moment, staying close to Kareem as the staff made their arrangements. On the morning of the visit, Sarah helped Kareem into a wheelchair specially designed for his needs. His hands trembled slightly as she arranged a blanket over his legs, but his eyes were clear and determined. "I never thought I'd see this day again," he admitted softly. As they made their way down the newly constructed ramp and along the garden path, Sarah noticed how Kareem's posture straightened, as if each meter brought him closer to his former self. The sound of nickering horses grew louder as they approached the stables, and she felt his excitement building. Mr. Rodriguez was waiting at the stable entrance, his weather-worn face beaming with pride. Inside, The once neglected structure had been restored to its former glory. The stalls were immaculate, brass nameplates gleaming in the morning light, and there, in the first stall, stood Malik, a magnificent Arabian stallion whose presence commanded attention. The horse's ears pricked forward as they approached, and he moved to the front of his stall, stretching his neck toward Kareem. What happened next brought tears to everyone's eyes. Malik, the proud stallion who typically allowed only Mr. Rodriguez to handle him, gently lowered his head and touched his muzzle to Kareem's outstretched hand. "Welcome back, old friend," Kareem whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The connection between man and horse was palpable, a reminder of the bonds that had survived years of enforced separation. As Sarah watched the reunion, she noticed something remarkable. Kareem's movements, which had been hesitant and measured during therapy, seemed more natural now. His fingers moved with greater certainty as they stroked Malik's velvet nose, and his voice carried more strength as he spoke to the horse in soft Arabic. The morning light streaming through the stable windows illuminated a scene of healing, not just for Kareem but for everyone who had maintained faith during the dark years. It was a moment of triumph that promised even greater victories to come as Kareem al-Rashid began to reclaim not just his voice but his entire world. The autumn breeze carried the sweet scent of hope through al-Rashid Manor's grounds. 2 months had passed since Kareem's first visit to the stables, and the changes in both the estate and its owner were remarkable. The mansion's once oppressive atmosphere had given way to an air of vibrant renewal, mirroring Kareem's own transformation. Sarah watched from the garden as Kareem, now able to stand with the support of specialized equipment, worked with Dr. Hassan on his balance exercises. His progress had exceeded everyone's expectations, his determination pushing past every obstacle. "Your core strength is improving significantly," Dr. Hassan noted, making adjustments to the support harness. "Soon we might be able to start with assisted walking." Kareem's face, once mask-like in its stillness, now animated with purpose and determination. "I want to ride again," he declared, his voice growing stronger each day. "Not just visit the stables, really ride." Dr. Hassan exchanged a knowing look with Sarah. They had been discussing this possibility in private, developing a plan that would safely allow Kareem to reconnect with his passion for riding. "We'll need to modify some equipment," Sarah suggested, "but I think we can make it happen." The news energized Kareem even further. During his afternoon rest, he called Sarah to his study, a room that had been redesigned to accommodate his rehabilitation needs while maintaining its original character. Luna lounged on his desk, watching as he practiced his writing exercises. "Sarah," he began, his hands steady as he sorted through some documents, "I've been thinking about the foundation. The children's programs Victoria nearly destroyed. I want to rebuild them, make them stronger than before, but I need your help." Sarah sat down, curious. "Of course, what do you have in mind?" "We have this entire estate, the best medical team and a successful breeding program," Kareem explained, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Why not combine them? Create a therapeutic riding center for children with special needs." The idea sparked immediate excitement in Sarah. She had seen firsthand the healing power of animals through Luna's effect on Kareem. The stables could be modified to accommodate different abilities, she mused. "And with your connections in the Arabian horse community." "Exactly," Kareem smiled, reaching out to scratch Luna behind the ears. "But I want to go further. Not just riding therapy, a complete wellness center, medical support, educational programs, family resources." As they discussed the possibilities, Maria appeared with afternoon tea, her face glowing with approval. The elderly housekeeper had bloomed in the mansion's new atmosphere, her maternal instincts now freely expressed. "The kitchen gardens could be expanded," she suggested. "Fresh vegetables for nutrition programs, maybe even horticultural therapy." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Rodriguez, bringing news from the stables. "Malik's newest foal is showing exceptional promise," he reported proudly. "Strong bloodlines, perfect conformation, and the gentlest temperament I've seen in years." "Perfect timing," Kareem replied, sharing his vision for the therapeutic riding center. The stable manager's weather-worn face lit up with enthusiasm as he immediately began suggesting which horses would be most suitable for the program. That evening, as Sarah completed her final rounds, she found Kareem in the garden, seated in his modified wheelchair with Luna in his lap. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a fitting backdrop to the transformation taking place at al-Rashid Manor. "You know," Kareem said softly as she approached, "during those silent years, I never lost hope completely. But I never imagined this second chance to make a difference." He gestured to the estate spreading out before them. All of this was built for show, for status. Now it can serve a real purpose. Sarah sat beside him, watching as the last rays of sunlight gilded the distant stables. "You're creating something beautiful from something painful," she observed. "That's a rare gift." "We're creating it," Kareem corrected her, reaching for her hand. The gesture, once impossible, now came naturally. "None of this would exist without you, Sarah. You saw me when everyone else had given up. You fought for me when it seemed hopeless." Their quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Hassan, carrying a tablet filled with new exercise protocols and development plans for the therapy center. The doctor's enthusiasm was contagious as she shared the latest research on equine-assisted therapy and its potential applications. As they reviewed the plans together, the manor's lights began to twinkle on, creating a warm glow that seemed to embrace the entire estate. The sound of horses nickering in the distance mixed with the evening birdsong, creating a symphony of life that had been absent for too long. Kareem's hand remained steady in Sarah's as they planned their future, not just his recovery, but the healing they could bring to others. The manor, once a symbol of isolation and secrets, was transforming into a beacon of hope, its gates soon to open wide for those in need of its special magic. Spring had painted al-Rashid Manor in a palette of vibrant colors. The gardens, once manicured for show, now burst with therapeutic herbs and sensory plants. Construction crews worked steadily to transform the East Wing into a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center, while the stables echoed with the sounds of renovation and renewal. Kareem, now able to walk short distances with minimal assistance, stood with Sarah at the window of his study, watching as the first group of therapy horses arrived. Among them was Hope, Malik's gentle-natured foal, now grown into a beautiful, young mare with her sire's intelligence and her own special talent for connecting with people. "She reminds me of you," Kareem said softly, his hand finding Sarah's. "She has that same instinct for knowing exactly what someone needs." Sarah smiled, remembering the long journey that had brought them to this moment. "I just listened to my heart," she replied, "like you're doing now, giving all of this a new purpose." Their conversation was interrupted by Dr. Hassan's arrival. With the latest architectural plans, the rehabilitation center was taking shape rapidly, incorporating cutting-edge technology while maintaining the warmth and character of the original building. "The sensory integration room is almost complete," Dr. Hassan reported excitedly, "and the hydrotherapy pool installation begins next week. We're also getting excellent responses from potential staff members. Your reputation in the medical community is opening many doors, Sarah." Kareem beamed with pride at the mention of Sarah's growing influence. Her innovative approach to his recovery had attracted attention from rehabilitation specialists worldwide, and she had become an sought-after consultant in cases similar to his. "We've also received the first round of applications for the children's program," Sarah added, pulling up the files on her tablet. 20 families so far, all looking for hope and healing. Luna, who had appointed herself supervisor of all manor activities, wound between their legs before jumping onto Kareem's desk to inspect the plans. Her presence had inspired them to include animal-assisted therapy as a key component of their program, with a special wing dedicated to training therapy cats. Later that afternoon, as Kareem worked through his daily riding therapy session, Sarah watched from the arena fence. His strength and confidence grew with each passing day, his bond with Malik a beautiful testament to the power of trust and perseverance. "You know," he called out to her between exercises, "we never really had a proper first date." His eyes twinkled with mischief as he guided Malik in a perfect circle. Sarah laughed, remembering how their relationship had evolved from nurse and patient to partners in every sense. Unless you count all those nights planning renovation details over medical charts and budget spreadsheets. I was thinking, Kareem continued, bringing Malik to a gentle stop. Maybe it's time we did something about that. The garden pavilion's restoration is complete and Maria has been hinting about arranging a special dinner. Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Rodriguez with news about the therapy horse training program. The stable manager's enthusiasm was infectious as he described how well the horses were adapting to their new roles. Even the most skeptical trainers are amazed, he reported proudly. These horses seem to understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. It's like they know they're part of something special. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the arena, Kareem and Sarah walked together through the gardens, their steps matched to each other's pace. The evening air was filled with the promise of new beginnings, both for them and for the countless lives they would touch through their work. I never imagined, Sarah mused, when I first walked through those gates, that I would find not just a patient to heal, but a whole new purpose in life. Kareem stopped, turning to face her. The last rays of sunlight caught the silver in his hair, a reminder of the years that had been taken from him. But his eyes shone with the vitality of a man who had been given a second chance at life. And love. Sarah, he began, his voice soft but clear, you didn't just give me back my voice or my strength. You showed me how to transform pain into purpose, silence into hope. Every life we touch through this center, every child who finds healing here, it all began with your courage to see beyond the surface. Their moment was interrupted by Luna's appearance, the cat weaving between their legs with her usual impeccable timing. Behind them, the manor glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, its windows bright with welcome, its halls no longer echoing with secrets, but buzzing with plans for the future. The transformation of al-Rashid Manor was more than just physical renovation. It was a testament to the healing power of love, determination, and the unwavering belief that every voice deserves to be heard. As Kareem and Sarah stood together in the growing twilight, they knew that their journey was not ending, but rather beginning anew, with each sunset promising an even more beautiful dawn. The morning of the Rehabilitation Center's inauguration dawned bright and clear. Al-Rashid Manor had been transformed into a beacon of hope, its grounds meticulously prepared for the ceremony that would mark the beginning of a new era. Colorful banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from the sensory gardens. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress, an elegant blue creation that Maria had insisted was perfect for the occasion. Luna sat on the dresser, watching with her usual feline wisdom, as if she knew this day would bring more than just the center's opening. A soft knock at the door revealed Maria, her eyes glistening with barely contained emotion. "Miss Sarah," she said, holding out a small velvet box. "Mr. Kareem asked me to give you this before the ceremony." Inside the box lay a delicate silver necklace with a pendant in the shape of a key. Attached was a note in Kareem's now steady handwriting. "To the woman who unlocked my world. Meet me in the garden pavilion before the ceremony. K." The garden pavilion had been transformed into an enchanted space, with climbing roses and twinkling lights creating an intimate atmosphere, even in the morning light. As Sarah approached, she saw Kareem standing there, tall and proud, no longer needing any support to maintain his balance. "Sarah," he said, turning to face her with eyes full of emotion, "before we open the center's doors to the world, I needed this moment with you." He took her hands in his touch sure and steady. "3 years ago you walked into my prison of silence and refused to accept the shadows that surrounded me. You fought not just for my voice, but for my dignity, my future, our future." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes as Kareem reached into his pocket and with graceful movement that would have been impossible months ago, lowered himself to one knee. "You gave me back my life, my purpose, and showed me what true love really means. Would you do me the honor of sharing the rest of our journey together? Will you marry me?" The ring he held was exquisite, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds that caught the morning light, but what made it truly special was the inscription she could see along the band. "Every voice deserves to be heard." "Yes," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, with all my heart." Their private moment of joy was interrupted by the distant sound of arriving vehicles, the first guests for the inauguration ceremony. Together, they walked toward the main grounds, where the transformation of al-Rashid Manor was about to be revealed to the world. The ceremony area had been set up facing the newly renovated stable block, where Hope and the other therapy horses watched curiously from their paddocks. The gathered crowd included medical professionals, community leaders, and most importantly, the families who would be the first to benefit from the center's programs. Dr. Hassan beamed with pride as she conducted tours of the medical facilities, while Mr. Rodriguez showcased the innovative therapeutic riding equipment. Maria had outdone herself with the refreshments, ensuring every dietary need was met with her usual thoughtful attention to detail. When it came time for the official ceremony, Kareem stood at the podium, his voice strong and clear as he addressed the gathered crowd. "Welcome to the al-Rashid Center for Therapeutic Healing," he began, his eyes finding Sarah's in the audience. "This place was born from a journey of silence to speech, from isolation to connection, from despair to hope. But more than that, it was born from love, the kind of love that sees possibility where others see limitation, that hears voices even in silence." He went on to outline the center's mission, introducing the specialized staff and explaining the comprehensive programs they would offer. But it was when he invited the first group of children to meet the therapy horses that the true magic of the place became evident. Hope, showing the gentleness she was named for, lowered her head to greet a young girl in a wheelchair, their connection immediate and profound. Around the paddock, similar scenes played out as children and horses found each other, their lives already beginning to change. Sarah watched it all with a full heart, the weight of the engagement ring on her finger a constant reminder of how far they had come. Luna had somehow found her way to the ceremony and sat regally beside her, supervising the proceedings with typical feline dignity. "This is just the beginning," Kareem said softly, joining Sarah as they watched the interactions between the children and horses. "Every life we touch here will create ripples of healing that extend far beyond these gates." The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, illuminating the newly painted sign at the manor's entrance. "Al-Rashid Center for Therapeutic Healing, where every voice matters." It was more than just a slogan, it was a promise, one that had grown from the deepest kind of love and understanding. 6 months after the center's inauguration, al-Rashid Manor's gardens were once again transformed, this time for a celebration of love. White roses and jasmine adorned every arch and pathway, their fragrance mingling with the sweet morning air. The same garden pavilion where Kareem had proposed now stood ready for a different kind of ceremony. The wedding was intentionally intimate, reflecting the genuine warmth that had become the manor's trademark. The guest list included not only their close friends and staff, but also many of the families whose lives had been touched by the center. Dr. Hassan, who had become much more than just a medical professional to them, stood as Sarah's matron of honor, while Mr. Rodriguez, representing the continuity of Kareem's vision, served as best man. Luna, refusing to be left out of such an important occasion, had claimed her place of honor on a specially prepared cushion near the altar, wearing a tiny flower collar that Maria had crafted with loving care. Hope and Malik watched from their nearby paddock, their presence a testament to the healing power of love and patience. As Sarah walked down the flower-strewn path toward Kareem, her heart swelled with emotion. He stood tall and proud, without any support needed, his eyes shining with love and gratitude. Their journey from nurse and patient to partners in life and purpose had been extraordinary, but somehow it felt like their story was still just beginning. 3 years ago, Kareem began his vows, his voice clear and strong. "I was trapped in silence, watching life pass by through a window of isolation. You didn't just give me back my voice, Sarah. You gave me back my purpose, my dreams, and my faith in love. You saw me when I was invisible, heard me when I was silent, and believed in me when I had forgotten how to believe in myself." Sarah's. Vows, spoken through happy tears, echoed their shared commitment not just to each other, but to the mission they had built together. Kareem, you taught me that true healing comes from the heart. Together, we've created something beautiful from pain, hope from despair. I promise to continue this journey with you, helping others find their voices, their strength, and their joy. The celebration that followed was a beautiful blend of cultures and traditions. Children from the therapy program released white doves into the sky, while Arabian horses from the breeding program performed a choreographed display that left guests breathless. The manor, once a symbol of isolation, had become a place where joy and healing danced together. As evening approached, Kareem and Sarah took a moment away from the festivities to visit the center's newest addition, a memorial garden dedicated to all those who had ever felt silenced or forgotten. A beautiful fountain at its center bore the inscription, "Every story deserves to be told, every voice deserves to be heard." "Look at what we've created," Sarah said softly, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Not just us, but everyone who believed in this dream." Kareem pulled her close, his movements fluid and natural. "And we're just getting started. Every day brings new stories, new voices waiting to be heard." The center had already achieved remarkable success. Children who had never spoken were finding their voices through animal-assisted therapy. Adults recovering from trauma were rebuilding their lives through the comprehensive rehabilitation programs. The breeding program, under Mr. Rodriguez's careful guidance, was producing horses specifically suited for therapeutic work. As they returned to their guests, the manor glowed with warmth and welcome. Music and laughter filled the air, mixing with the gentle nickering of horses and the purring of therapy cats. It was the sound of healing, of joy, of life being lived to its fullest. Dear readers, as we conclude this tale of love, healing, and the power of believing in voices yet unheard, we invite you to become part of this continuing journey. Every day, stories like Kareem and Sarah's unfold around us, stories of courage, perseverance, and the transformative power of love. To ensure you never miss another inspiring tale, please subscribe to our channel and join our community of believers in the power of healing and hope. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know in the comments below. Share your own experiences with healing, hope, and the power of never giving up. Every like helps spread this message of love and transformation to those who might need it most. Remember, just as Sarah believed in Kareem's voice, your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to light. A special playlist of similar inspiring tales awaits you. Simply click the link to your left to discover more stories that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. Together we can ensure that every voice finds its audience, every story touches a heart, and every dream finds its way to reality. Turn on notifications to join us tomorrow for another journey into the extraordinary power of love and healing. Until then, remember that within every silence lies a voice waiting to be heard, and within every heart lives a story waiting to be told. Fimda Historia.